When the sign of Cancer is placed under pressure, a silent storm begins to churn beneath its calm exterior. Governed by the moon, Cancer is deeply emotional, intuitive, and bound to the tides of feeling that shape their internal landscape. But to underestimate Cancer under pressure is to misunderstand the alchemical power that lies hidden in their shell. This is not a sign that buckles in the face of adversity. Rather, it transforms, becoming a force of immense emotional resilience and protective power. When challenged, Cancer initially absorbs the pressure like the sea absorbs a storm, quietly, deeply, and with a contemplative stillness that can be mistaken for weakness. But within that stillness, a process begins. Cancer is ruled by cardinal energy, the initiating force. Beneath their soft exterior lies a warrior spirit driven by loyalty, instinct, and a profound sense of purpose. When the world becomes demanding, when expectations mount and deadlines loom, Cancer taps into their inner sanctuary, drawing from memories, dreams, and emotional intelligence to navigate what others might flee from. In the workplace, Cancer under pressure becomes fiercely efficient and driven, not through cold calculation, but through an impassioned sense of responsibility. They feel their way forward, sensing what needs to be done, often before it is spoken aloud. Their empathy, which some might view as a hindrance in high-pressure environments, becomes their greatest asset. They read the room, anticipate tensions, and quietly steady the emotional undercurrents of a team. While others panic or push blindly forward, Cancer remembers the humanity within the chaos. They rise by anchoring themselves in meaning, in connection, and in the certainty that what they do matters. Socially, the weight of expectation can feel suffocating to Cancer. Yet this is a sign that has been carrying ancestral emotional wisdom for lifetimes. When societal norms demand they conform, when their softness is ridiculed, when they are pressured to suppress their feelings, Cancer does not collapse. Instead, they become even more rooted in their truth. They transmute pain into compassion, rejection into inner fortitude, and exclusion into self-nourishment. They are the quiet revolutionaries, challenging pressure not with noise, but with presence. They heal in a world that often demands performance. They protect what others forget to value. Within the family sphere, where the Cancer soul feels both most nourished and most burdened, the pressure can be the most intense. Expectations of care, roles inherited from tradition, emotional labor passed down like heirlooms. These weigh heavily. But here, Cancer shows their true might. They love with a ferocity that bends time, and they sacrifice without complaint. But when the pressure becomes unjust, when the giving becomes one-sided, Cancer sets boundaries with the same intensity with which they once gave. Their instinct to nurture is balanced by their right to self-protection. They walk away not with bitterness, but with wisdom, knowing that no one can pour from an empty vessel. Cancer's greatest power under pressure lies in their ability to regenerate emotionally. Where other signs might burn out or break, Cancer retreats, replenishes, and returns stronger. They know the sacred rhythm of withdrawal and resurgence. Their sanctuary, whether internal or physical, becomes a fortress. There, they remember who they are, far from the noise, far from the judgment. They gather their strength not through domination, but through emotional alchemy. They turn wounds into weapons of compassion, silence into insight, and solitude into clarity. Emerging from pressure, Cancer does not simply survive. They rise with new emotional armor, forged from experience and empathy. They become leaders who understand what it means to feel deeply and still carry on. They inspire not by shouting, but by standing tall in their truth. In a world obsessed with speed and appearance, Cancer teaches the value of depth, of stillness, of heart. They thrive not because they are immune to pressure, but because they know how to hold it, how to feel through it, how to let it shape them without destroying them. And so, under challenge, Cancer becomes the moonlight that guides in darkness, the tide that shapes the shore, the protector who stands between the chaos and the sacred. With their unshakable devotion, emotional brilliance, and quiet strength, they remind the world that pressure does not always require force. Sometimes it calls for love with a backbone of steel. And in this, Cancer is unmatched. When Cancer is faced with pressure that pushes them beyond familiar waters, they awaken aspects of their nature that often remain dormant in peaceful times. Their response to stress is never linear. It flows, twists, and adapts like the moon-driven tides that govern their essence. In these moments, Cancer unveils an ancient resilience tied not only to personal will but to cosmic memory. They are not merely reacting, they are remembering lifetimes of emotional battles fought in silence, of sacrifices made in shadows, of strength grown in the soil of the soul. There is a mystical intelligence in Cancer's ability to navigate the unseen. Under pressure, while others rely solely on logic or brute force, Cancer tunes into frequencies beneath the surface. They feel the unspoken fears of those around them. They sense when a decision, although practical, is misaligned with integrity. Their psychic sensitivity sharpens under pressure, transforming from gentle empathy into a fierce, guiding intuition. This internal compass never fails them because it is rooted in both heart and cosmos. In high-stakes environments, Cancer may not be the loudest voice in the room, but their presence often becomes the grounding force that holds everything together. They are the unacknowledged backbone of many successes, carrying emotional burdens others cannot see. In moments of collapse, when structures falter and systems fail, Cancer does not shatter. Instead, they step forward with quiet command, drawing on an ancient knowing that chaos can be the beginning of sacred transformation. They know how to rebuild from the ashes, not with haste, but with care, ensuring that every brick is laid with meaning. One of the most underestimated traits Cancer reveals under pressure is their strategic brilliance. Though often cast as solely emotional, Cancer is a cardinal sign. This means they initiate, they act, they lead. But they do so differently. Rather than charging into battle blindly, they observe, absorb, and strike when the time is right. They are patient warriors. They protect their energy until the moment demands their full power. When they finally unleash it, they do so with precision, driven not by ego, but by a sacred sense of timing and purpose. Another often overlooked strength is Cancer's ability to transmute vulnerability into influence. While others may view emotional openness as a liability, Cancer knows that to feel deeply is to live fully. Under pressure, they allow their pain to deepen their wisdom. They do not deny their fears, they transform them. They embrace the tears, the doubt, the trembling hands, and then they rise, carrying the lessons etched into their bones. Their vulnerability becomes a beacon for others, a reminder that courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to face it again and again. When their personal values are threatened, Cancer becomes immovable. They may be adaptable in many things, but when their moral compass is challenged, they become a force of unwavering integrity. They will defend what is sacred, be it a person, a principle, or a dream, with a loyalty that can outlast time itself. No matter the storm, Cancer will not betray what they hold dear. And it is this loyalty, this steadfast heart, that makes them indestructible when they are aligned with their higher truth. In relationships strained by pressure, Cancer evolves from caretaker to conscious guardian. They realize that nurturing does not mean self-sacrifice to the point of depletion. They learn to pour from a full cup, to protect their peace, and to set boundaries that honor both themselves and others. They teach those around them that love is not just softness. It is responsibility, it is choice, it is holding space without losing oneself. In this, they elevate every relationship they touch, becoming catalysts for healing and depth. The spiritual aspect of Cancer's strength cannot be overlooked. Under intense pressure, they often find themselves drawn to the mystical, the symbolic, the divine. They may turn to rituals, to moon phases, to ancestral guidance. They are not navigating alone. They are walking with the wisdom of those who came before. Their lineage speaks through their instincts. The moon, their ruler, is a mirror to the soul, and Cancer learns to gaze into it unflinchingly. They face their shadows not with judgment, but with the grace of one who knows that every darkness holds a seed of light. When the journey becomes overwhelming, when the world demands more than they think they can give, Cancer remembers that their power is not in pretending to be unshakable. It is in knowing that they can bend and still not break. It is in retreating to replenish and then returning renewed and fortified. Like the tides, they rise and fall, but always return stronger. And every time they do, they remind the world of the sacred rhythm of resilience. In the end, Cancer emerges from pressure not only intact but transformed. They become the emotional architects of their own legacy. They teach through presence, through heart, through quiet revolutions of compassion. They are the protectors of the soul's flame in a world that too often forgets its warmth. And when all is said and done, Cancer does not just survive the storm. They become its calm eye, its healing aftermath, its silent wisdom. And from that still center, they continue to rise. There is a dimension within Cancer that only awakens in the crucible of relentless pressure. A sacred depth not often witnessed, even by those closest to them. This is the realm of ancestral memory, of emotional DNA passed down through generations, encoded in the very soul of the Cancer archetype. When pressure intensifies to its highest degree, when the world becomes unrelenting, expectations swell, and emotions threaten to overflow, Cancer becomes a living vessel of generational strength. Their reactions are not merely personal. They are echoes of every survivor who came before them. They carry not just their own burdens, but the burdens of lineage, of family histories written in silent sacrifice and unspoken resilience. Within this spiritual lineage lies one of Cancer's most extraordinary gifts: their ability to create sanctuary under fire. In moments of chaos, they construct emotional sanctuaries not only for themselves but for others. They know how to hold space like ancient healers, how to soothe the wounds of those around them without ever diminishing their own power. Even while battling their own inner storms, they extend warmth, food, comfort, stillness. A touch, a word, a gesture that seems to say, "You are safe here." This alchemy, the art of transforming turmoil into tenderness, is one of Cancer's most profound weapons under pressure. The Cancerian spirit does not seek confrontation, but when it comes, they do not retreat in fear, they withdraw with purpose. That withdrawal is not escape. It is preparation. It is sacred retreat, the kind that allows the soul to sharpen its tools, cleanse its wounds, and listen to its higher calling. While others may interpret this as avoidance, it is in truth an intentional act of preservation, the necessary silence before a defining return. Cancer does not strike with impulse. They wait until the moment is aligned with the emotional truth they are guided by. And when they do return, they do so with words that cut through noise, with actions that carry the full force of their heart's wisdom. Another dimension that pressure brings forth is Cancer's capacity to lead through nurturing. In the modern world, leadership is often portrayed as dominance, authority, and control. But Cancer teaches another kind of leadership, one that rises through empathy, through intuitive foresight, through unwavering presence. Under pressure, Cancer becomes the guardian of morale, the emotional anchor in a group, the quiet strategist whose every move is guided by deep understanding. They do not command armies. They nourish movements. They lead by embodying the values that others only speak of: authenticity, loyalty, and care. Their leadership is not declared. It is felt. When faced with emotional manipulation, betrayal, or unjust judgment, Cancer's strength takes on another form entirely. This is when the divine protector awakens within them. No longer merely a nurturer, Cancer becomes a defender, a sacred shield. They are capable of withstanding emotional attacks that would break others. And not only do they endure, they respond with actions that are infused with both grace and force. Their retaliation is never petty. It is principled. They strike where it is necessary to protect what is sacred, and they do so with the dignity of one who knows that emotional intelligence is a weapon far more powerful than brute reaction. Under prolonged pressure, Cancer also evolves their perception of vulnerability. What once felt like fragility becomes recognized as a superpower. They stop apologizing for their tears, for their sensitivity, for their depth. They realize that to feel so deeply in a world numbed by haste is a divine rebellion. In the face of dehumanizing pressure, they insist on humanity. In the face of indifference, they choose compassion. In the face of isolation, they offer connection. And with this, They become walking sanctuaries, living testaments to the truth that emotional depth is not weakness, but revolution. There is a mythic quality to the way Cancer overcomes adversity. Like the moon itself, they are in a constant cycle of waxing and waning. Pressure does not distort them, it refines them. Every emotional battle scars them in ways that become luminous. They wear their heartbreak like armor, not as victims, but as sacred warriors who have returned from the underworld with gifts of healing, wisdom, and power. They do not erase their pain, they integrate it, allowing it to inform their compassion, to deepen their authenticity, to forge their legacy. In their quietest moments, when no one sees their effort, Cancer continues to work. Behind the scenes, beneath the surface, nurturing visions no one else understands until they are finally made manifest. Their creativity under pressure is often underestimated. But it is in this crucible that they create art, stories, safe homes, and soul-deep connections that outlast time. They are not only survivors, they are creators of life in all its forms. Pressure may try to compress them, but they respond by expanding their capacity for love, for vision, for transformation. Ultimately, Cancer proves that the greatest strength does not roar. It holds, it nurtures, it heals, it remembers. When all others have fled or fallen silent, it is Cancer who remains, the keeper of the flame, the guardian of what is tender and true, the force that reclaims the soul when the world threatens to strip it away. They do not just rise from pressure. They emerge as living legends of the emotional realm, wearing their scars not as shame, but as symbols of sacred endurance. And in doing so, they remind us all that feeling deeply is not just survival, it is the highest form of triumph. In the astrological wheel, Cancer holds dominion over the threshold between the internal and external world, where the emotional becomes tangible, where intuition sculpts reality. Under pressure, Cancer does not merely react, they transmute. When surrounded by demands, criticism, or relentless trials, they call upon a primordial force that resides deep in the marrow of their being. A force connected to the moon's ancient rhythm, to the pulse of oceans, to the heartbeat of the earth itself. This force is not loud, it is not brash, it is enduring, it is sacred, and it emerges most clearly when Cancer is pushed to the edge of emotional overwhelm. In these moments, Cancer unlocks one of their most mysterious powers, the ability to sense the future by feeling the present. Their intuitive foresight sharpens like a blade in silence. They perceive the currents of destiny not through analysis, but through sensation. While others lose themselves in chaos, Cancer feels what is coming, what must change, what must end. They do not need a map. They become one. They are guided by inner visions that rise not from fantasy, but from emotional truth aligned with cosmic timing. This is a prophetic gift, rarely acknowledged, but always present in the soul of Cancer when the world grows dark. Under pressure, the creativity of Cancer becomes a weapon of rebirth. Governed by the fourth house, which rules home, roots, and psychological foundations, Cancer draws inspiration not from the superficial, but from the primal. In their moments of greatest duress, they do not merely hold the line, they build anew. They write poetry from their pain, compose beauty from their longing, cook meals that nourish broken spirits, plant seeds in barren ground with the unwavering belief that something good will rise again. Their imagination, fueled by emotion, becomes a tool for revolution. They do not need perfect conditions to create. They only need heart. And when that heart is under siege, it becomes a fountain of resilience that never runs dry. Socially, Cancer under pressure often becomes a mirror to those around them, reflecting back what is unspoken. This mirroring can be deeply uncomfortable for others, because Cancer exposes emotional truths that have been buried or denied. Their very presence, especially under pressure, reveals what needs to be healed. This is not done intentionally, it is a byproduct of their lunar nature. Just as the moon reveals the night without altering it, Cancer reveals emotional truths without force. But this exposure has power. In workplaces, families, and communities, Cancer becomes the quiet awakener. They stir conscience. They awaken empathy. They remind others of what truly matters when the surface begins to crack. In moments when external forces demand detachment or cold efficiency, Cancer responds with the sacred defiance of warmth. They continue to care when caring is called weak. They continue to feel when feeling is dismissed. And in doing so, they create a radical shift in the atmosphere. The energy they emit under pressure becomes a soft armor, a field of protection not just for themselves, but for anyone brave enough to stand beside them. They lead others back to themselves not with orders, but with presence. They become emotional anchors, not by resisting the storm, but by becoming part of the ocean that weathers it. Cancer's relationship with time also shifts under pressure. They no longer move according to clocks or schedules, but according to deeper rhythms, the cycle of breath, the cycle of healing, the return to center. They understand that regeneration does not happen instantly. They give themselves permission to mend, to rest, to disappear when needed. And when they return, they are transformed. Pressure teaches Cancer how to be loyal to their own process. It reveals that the pace of the soul does not match the pace of the world. This understanding becomes their liberation. It becomes the soil in which their most legendary growth begins. There is a hidden stoicism within Cancer that is only activated in prolonged adversity. While they are often seen as emotionally expressive, they also possess an unparalleled capacity to endure without recognition. They do not demand applause. They do not crave validation. Their fulfillment comes from knowing they stood firm in love when fear could have ruled them. Their quiet endurance under emotional pressure becomes mythic, the kind of strength that inspires stories, legends, and generational gratitude. They become examples not of loud triumph, but of the kind of victory that takes place in kitchens, in hospital rooms, in late-night solitude where no one is watching but the moon. When societal pressure attempts to homogenize them, to erase their emotional complexity in favor of sterility or surface roles, Cancer responds by rooting deeper into their individuality. They reclaim the right to feel everything, to want connection, to need rest, to nurture dreams as sacred offerings. They do not allow the world to flatten them. Instead, they expand their emotional vocabulary, mastering the language of grief, joy, nostalgia, and hope with equal reverence. In this way, they become emotional scholars, teaching through their presence that emotional intelligence is not optional. It is essential to human evolution. The legacy of Cancer under pressure is not only survival, it is sacred reconstruction. They are the ones who remember the songs of old, who gather what is broken and assemble it into something more whole than before. They do this not as martyrs, but as architects of meaning. They weave together threads of compassion and strength, memory and vision, grief and celebration. Their life becomes a tapestry of emotional triumph, stitched in the unseen hours of struggle. And when the moon shines on them after the storm, Cancer stands quietly victorious, not seeking the spotlight, but radiant nonetheless. Not because they conquered the pressure with brute force, but because they endured it without abandoning their softness. They kept the light on, they held the line, they felt it all, and rose anyway. In that rising, they do not just survive. They become sacred symbols of what it means to live fully, bravely, and beautifully in a world that often forgets how to feel. Within the labyrinth of the zodiac, Cancer stands as the sacred guardian of memory and emotional wisdom, and when the fires of pressure are lit beneath them, be it through societal injustice, internal crises, or external chaos, they awaken a level of power that defies rational explanation. This power is not one that explodes outward, nor does it seek conquest or applause. It is a deeply rooted force, like magma beneath the surface of the earth, ancient and patient, waiting for the right moment to rise. Pressure becomes the sacred forge where Cancer's intuitive might is tempered into unshakable resolve. They are not shaped by pressure in the way others are. They alchemize it, absorbing the weight into their bones and transmuting it into unspoken strength. Their connection to the lunar mysteries gives them access to a spiritual rhythm that exists beyond the ticking of clocks or the weight of deadlines. When time becomes a battlefield and urgency surrounds them like smoke, Cancer shifts into another dimension entirely. They move according to soul time, a mystical awareness of when to act, when to wait, and when to flow. This isn't hesitation, it is divine timing. Their instincts are synchronized with a larger cosmic intelligence that speaks not in words, but in pulses and silences. When they trust this rhythm, even the most suffocating pressure begins to unravel in their presence. What seemed urgent is revealed to be illusion. What felt impossible becomes clear. They see through the emotional fog that others fear, and they walk forward not because they are unafraid, but because their purpose is greater than their fear. In family dynamics, where ancestral burdens and inherited expectations converge, Cancer carries a role that is both sacred and often invisible. Under the strain of generational pain, they become the emotional redeemers, the ones who refuse to continue cycles of abandonment, emotional repression, or neglect. This responsibility is monumental and often unspoken, but Cancer accepts it not out of obligation, but because they understand the value of emotional legacy. They do not just carry wounds, they turn them into wisdom. They teach future generations not by command, but by example. Their grace under emotional fire becomes a lighthouse for those who follow, guiding them back to authenticity, softness, and depth. When the world demands constant output, robotic efficiency, and detachment, Cancer rebels by reclaiming the sacred art of rest. Rest, for Cancer, is not laziness. It is repair, recalibration, and resistance. In times of pressure, when every force around them pushes for speed and productivity, Cancer knows when to retreat into stillness. That stillness is where they remember who they are. It is where their dreams speak to them again, where their ancestors whisper their names, where their soul returns to its original alignment. They emerge from this sacred cocoon not diminished, but more luminous. While others burn out, Cancer regenerates. In partnerships and intimate spaces strained by external pressure, Cancer embodies the essence of emotional loyalty. They become the ones who stay, who hold hands through the storm, who refuse to abandon love even when everything else falls away. Their loyalty is not passive. It is a deliberate, daily act of choosing love, even when love is hard. They do not flinch in the face of emotional labor. They embrace it, they elevate it, and through this, they heal wounds in others that have never been touched. They do not just listen, they absorb, understand, and reflect back love in its truest form. They become sanctuaries in human form, safe harbors in the fiercest emotional tempests. Professionally, when Cancer is under intense work-related pressure, whether through competition, deadlines, or toxic dynamics, they invoke their strategic brilliance. Often underestimated due to their emotional depth, Cancer is in fact one of the most tactically gifted signs. As a cardinal water sign, they know how to initiate change with subtlety and precision. They watch, they wait, they understand emotional undercurrents that others ignore. And when they move, they do so in ways that permanently shift the landscape. They do not need to dominate to succeed. They need only to align with their inner vision and trust their emotional intelligence. Their career victories often arrive through perseverance, intuition, and the kind of inner knowing that cannot be taught, only remembered. Beneath the pressure of living in a world that undervalues emotional truth, Cancer dares to embody it fully. They refuse to numb themselves just to fit in. They refuse to silence their tears to seem strong. They do not wear masks, they wear hearts. And in doing so, they become beacons of emotional authenticity. Every time they choose to feel instead of flee, to love instead of harden, to nurture instead of abandon, they send a ripple through the collective consciousness. They remind the world that true power does not come from dominance, but from presence. Not from control, but from care. Not from perfection, but from the courage to be vulnerable in an unforgiving world. Even in isolation, Cancer draws upon a reservoir of cosmic connection. They are ruled not only by the moon, but by the ancient energies of water itself, element of healing, memory, and intuition. Water teaches them how to adapt without losing form, how to carry weight without drowning, how to move around obstacles instead of fighting them. Under extreme pressure, when every path seems blocked, Cancer becomes the river, quiet, persistent, unstoppable. They erode walls not with force, but with patience. They reach their destination not by force of will alone, but by refusing to abandon their flow. Their life journey under pressure becomes a sacred myth. They are the emotional warrior who has died and been reborn countless times, each time carrying more compassion, more wisdom, more light. Their story is not one of linear success, but of cyclical awakening. Fall, rise, retreat, return. Each phase deepening their soul, sharpening their intuition, softening their heart. They are not defined by a single victory, but by 1,000 quiet moments where they chose to continue, to feel, to love, even when no one was watching. And when the great weight finally lifts, when the storm subsides and the sky clears, Cancer does not emerge seeking glory. They emerge changed. They emerge radiant, not because they defeated the pressure, but because they integrated it. They become living proof that softness is not weakness. It is strength refined by soul. And wherever they go, they carry that light, that warmth, that quiet epic courage that reminds the world how to be human again. There exists within Cancer an archetype of ancient spiritual stewardship that is rarely understood yet profoundly felt by those fortunate enough to witness it in action. This energy is that of the soul sentinel, the emotional custodian of collective memory. In times of global upheaval, cultural disconnection, or societal collapse, Cancer rises as a keeper of what is sacred: family, heritage, soul, compassion. They are not simply protectors of people. They are guardians of the soul's continuity. Under enormous societal or environmental pressure, when entire systems are crumbling or being redefined, Cancer doesn't just adapt. They preserve the essence of what must endure. Their soul is encoded with the spiritual language of symbols, of intuition, of rituals passed down not through words but through lived feeling. When a culture forgets its stories, when a family loses its sense of belonging, when a community fragments under the pressure of disconnection, Cancer becomes the spiritual weaver, mending the invisible threads that bind human hearts together. In this role, they are not driven by ego or ambition, but by a deep and selfless devotion to emotional continuity. They carry forward the flame that cannot be seen but must always be felt. And through their work, their presence, their love, they ensure that no one truly vanishes into the silence of time. When pressure becomes existential, when the weight of the world settles into their chest and the future feels uncertain, Cancer draws upon one of their most mythic faculties: emotional resurrection. They do not simply heal, they are reborn. And with each rebirth comes greater depth, greater wisdom, greater capacity to guide others through the labyrinth of despair into the sanctuary of hope. Their emotional journeys become sacred maps for those who come after. They show the way through darkness not by preaching, but by embodying the truth that transformation is possible, that wholeness can be reclaimed, that the spirit, even when cracked, can still shine through with incandescent power. Their relationship with the moon deepens under stress, turning them into emotional alchemists. Just as the moon influences the tides, so too does Cancer learn to influence emotional atmospheres. In families that are fractured by conflict, in organizations wounded by distrust, in relationships poisoned by disconnection, Cancer brings the balm, the wave of feeling that dissolves resistance and invites truth. They know that emotion is not a liability, it is the doorway to reconciliation. While others battle over logic and dominance, Cancer pours empathy into the cracks, and slowly, the walls fall away. They become invisible healers, reshaping worlds without ever needing to raise their voice. In intimate relationships strained by emotional exhaustion, misunderstanding, or absence of support, Cancer becomes an anchor of unwavering devotion. They understand that love is not just an experience. It is a choice, a discipline, a sacred agreement to be present even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. When their partner cannot carry their own burdens, Cancer carries them both. Not because they must, but because they understand that love is not always equal in effort. It is equal in soul. They give from a well that never runs dry, not because they are naive, but because they believe in love's redemptive force. Their commitment under emotional duress becomes a model of devotion that heals more than just the relationship. It heals generational wounds that have echoed through time. When spiritual pressure weighs heavily, when their sense of purpose feels clouded or lost, Cancer does not drift into meaninglessness. Instead, they descend into the sacred waters of their inner world. There, In the quiet sanctuary of their own heart, they reconnect to the divine. They do not seek enlightenment in abstractions, but in presence, in a child's laughter, in the smell of home, in the rhythm of breath. Cancer finds God in the details, and under spiritual pressure, they become channels for grace. Their rituals become prayers, their kindness becomes liturgy, their tears become offerings. They are not followers of doctrine, they are followers of the soul's natural wisdom, and their faith, forged under pressure, becomes unshakable. When misunderstood or judged for their sensitivity in a world that values detachment and stoicism, Cancer rises as the emotional prophet. They do not retaliate with anger or withdrawal. They respond by embodying the truth of their feelings even more boldly. In doing so, they reclaim emotional intelligence as a form of divine clarity. They do not apologize for their depth. They celebrate it. And through this unapologetic authenticity, they become way showers for others who have been hiding their truth. They turn their emotional pain into purpose, their emotional insight into guidance. In this way, Cancer becomes not only the healer but the emotional revolutionary, dismantling a world of numbness and rebuilding one of compassion. Even in silence, even in solitude, Cancer's power amplifies. Alone, they commune with the rhythms of the cosmos, drawing insight not from words but from energies. The moon speaks to them in symbols, dreams, and tides, teaching them how to shift, when to act, when to wait, and when to trust. This cosmic communion becomes their compass under pressure. They do not flail in the dark. They listen, and that listening reveals the path. Their intuition becomes divine instruction. And once they have heard it, they act with the certainty of one who is backed by ancestral truth and lunar wisdom. Their existence, in its fullness, becomes a living prayer. A prayer for softness in a hard world. A prayer for connection in a time of division. A prayer for heart-centered living when so much demands coldness. Every moment they choose feeling over apathy, compassion over judgment, presence over performance, they rewrite what it means to be strong. They teach that the greatest power is not in domination, but in devotion. Not in perfection, but in presence. Not in silence, but in the courage to say, I feel, I care, I will not abandon this love. And when the great pressures of life finally pass, when the long night yields to dawn, Cancer emerges not worn down, but woven anew. Their softness has become steel. Their heart has become a sanctuary. Their story has become scripture for the soul. They carry the moon in their chest and the sea in their bones. They are no longer merely a sign. They are a myth made flesh. And through them, the world remembers how to feel, how to heal, and how to rise over and over again. In the hidden realms of cosmic design, Cancer holds dominion not merely over the tides and the heart, but over the essence of sacred protection. Protection not just of people, but of purpose, memory, and soul. This sign is the silent sentinel at the gate of emotional integrity, the unyielding shield against forces that threaten to erode the sanctity of the human spirit. When unseen pressures begin to mount, those subtle energies that drain the soul, those shadowy doubts that creep in during sleepless nights, the unspoken expectations that suffocate authenticity, Cancer becomes more than a survivor. Cancer becomes a force of spiritual guardianship. There is a divine defiance in the way Cancer endures. Not loud, not theatrical, but rooted in something ancient, lunar, and sovereign. When others succumb to the illusion of chaos, when systems collapse and order crumbles, Cancer builds a sanctuary from the ruins, not out of materials, but out of meaning. They do not simply create safe spaces, they consecrate them. Every home they touch, every heart they nurture, every memory they preserve becomes a living altar to love. In doing so, Cancer performs emotional architecture on a soul level, constructing invisible cathedrals of belonging in a world obsessed with exile. When Cancer is placed under the slow, grinding pressure of long-term adversity, months of emotional drought, years of delayed recognition, a lifetime of feeling unseen or undervalued, they become something more than tenacious. They become transcendent. There is a sacred patience that defines them, a patience born of deep lunar cycles and the knowledge that no winter lasts forever. They do not race toward healing. They become the womb in which healing gestates. They are not deterred by the slowness of growth, nor by the invisibility of their efforts. Their reward is not in applause, but in the quiet, steady return of light after long darkness. This is their sacred rhythm. This is their silent victory. In moments when their nurturing nature is weaponized against them, when they are accused of being too much, too soft, too emotional, they do not wither. They remember who they are. They are ruled by the moon, the great sovereign of emotional cycles, the celestial being who lights the night with borrowed brilliance, and yet moves oceans with silent authority. They do not need validation to know their worth. They are born of the tides, and tides do not ask permission to rise. When others ridicule their depth, they go deeper. When others mock their care, they become even more compassionate. Their response to ridicule is radiant integrity. When trapped in rigid systems, corporate structures devoid of empathy, institutional frameworks that dismiss intuition, societal norms that reward detachment, Cancer becomes a quiet revolutionary. They bring heart into the machine. They weave soul into bureaucracy. They infuse humanity into the coldest of structures simply by being themselves fully. They do not need to dismantle the machine to change it. They transform it from within, like water seeping through stone, eroding harshness with persistent grace. Their presence, unyielding in its authenticity, softens even the most resistant environments, and their influence lingers long after they've gone. In leadership, Cancer embodies a model rarely seen but urgently needed, the archetype of the nurturing commander. They lead not by domination, but by devotion. They do not push, they uplift. They do not demand loyalty. They earn it through emotional presence, deep listening, and protective care. Under pressure, they make decisions not only with logic but with soul consciousness. They sense what is unsaid. They lead from the heart without ever losing sight of the mission. In their command, people do not just follow, they bloom. And this flowering, born under their stewardship, becomes their lasting legacy. When their own emotions threaten to overwhelm them under intense pressure, Cancer does not collapse, they commune. They sit with their sorrow like an old friend, allowing it to speak, to breathe, to exist. In this sacred dialogue with their own pain, they discover revelations others miss. For Cancer, emotional overwhelm is not a sign of weakness. It is an initiation. Through it, they uncover truths that cannot be accessed by intellect alone. And from this communion, they emerge with deeper empathy, sharper intuition, and a soul forged by feeling. When forced to operate in solitude, estranged from the very connections that give them life, Cancer transforms isolation into invocation. They call back parts of themselves scattered by trauma or silence. They gather memories, fragments of dreams, whispers of ancestors, and in the sacred solitude of inner work, they reassemble their essence. Their ability to self-soothe becomes a mystic art. They do not depend on others for their restoration. They summon it from the deep. They become whole not because they are unbroken, but because they choose to reclaim every piece of their brokenness with reverence. In the realm of creative expression, Cancer under pressure channels their depth into art that pierces veils. Their stories carry soul signatures. Their music evokes ancestral longing. Their paintings become portals into unspoken realms. They do not create to impress. They create to survive, to transmute, to remember. Their art is alchemy, and under pressure, their creativity becomes a sacred rite, healing not only themselves, but all who encounter it. When navigating conflict, Cancer uses emotional strategy that is vastly underestimated. They observe patterns. They sense wounds. They understand the language beneath the words. And when they respond, it is with precision. Not cruelty, not retreat, precision. They say what needs to be said, no more and no less. And in this way, they dismantle deception, soothe rage, and often disarm those who came to fight. Not because they are passive, but because they understand that the heart is a weapon of immense power when wielded with truth. Through all of this, Cancer never forgets the power of emotional legacy. They are not concerned only with surviving pressure in the moment. They are attuned to what will echo beyond them. They are architects of legacy, crafting emotional imprints that will ripple through time. Every choice they make under pressure, every act of love, every moment of care, every refusal to abandon compassion, becomes part of the ancestral song they leave behind. And in this way, they achieve immortality not through fame, but through resonance, through soul, through the quiet epic of being fully, unapologetically human. This is Cancer's sacred power. This is their myth unfolding. This is how they rise, by descending first, by softening into strength, by remembering who they are even when the world forgets. They are the tide. They are the moon. They are the heart that refuses to close. And in that refusal, they become the hope that cannot be extinguished.